So yes, part 3 of the Game of Thrones characters videos. I just thought there's a few more characters I want to talk about, and there will probably most definitely be a part 4 and maybe even more. So I hope you enjoy it, everyone. So first up on the list this time will be the Night King. Slightly different characters in the book and the show, but we all know what he's about. So what I've chosen for the Night King is Maison Francis Kirkjean Gentle Fluidity Silver, which is a very cold, crisp, beautiful fragrance. It has a lot of fresh cardamom, juniper, all kind of like a blue aquatic fragrance, which of course matches the Night King perfectly. Now in the books it's a bit, well, and in the show, it's the Night King the bad guy? Given there's no real way of communicating with him and it's more just his stares, is he actually there to protect the realm of men from men? Because don't forget, he was created by the children of the forest. Yeah, he was created by the children of the forest to kind of protect them against the men. And of course the Night King, well, according to the show, was a man who has obviously had dragonglass plunged into his heart to save everyone, to save them against men. So maybe he's just doing the right thing, and obviously the war's going on and that, and maybe it's just about time that it was reset and the island was returned to them. I suppose we never will really know what his motive was, and obviously in the show he was killed in the most crappiest, ridiculous way ever. So yeah, that's the Night King, and that's Maison Francis Kirkjean Gentle Fluidity Silver. Next up is Roose Bolton. Now Roose, again, has a bit of a bad reputation in the books, doesn't he, and in the show. But actually there is a reason why Roose is quite the way he is, and that is mainly due to the fact that, really, historically, the Boltons have been pretty badly treated by the Starks. Generally had their power quashed and all of that. Now obviously they have a bad reputation. Obviously their sigil is the flayed man, and Roose is kind of, I think Roose's motivation is just to get his family's name back, to give them a place again, to make them powerful, and maybe get a bit of revenge on the Starks along the way, which is possibly why he quite easily turns against them, doesn't he? It's not because he's evil, it's to protect the reputation of his house. So yeah, what fragrance have I picked for Roose Bolton? So for Roose, I've picked Rose Prick. And the reason I've picked that is because obviously you would need some sort of rose. And Rose Prick has 2 roses, and obviously it's red, blood red. It's like Roose himself, and Rose Prick is a little bit different to most roses. As the name would suggest, it's got a little bit of a spike to it, a little bit of something a bit kind of dark and spicy. So I think it suits him perfectly. I think as well that idea also represents the 2 roses, and that represents his relationship with Ramsay a little bit. Because of course Ramsay killed all his natural born sons, and Ramsay is ultimately a bastard. So he has quite a tricky relationship with him, doesn't he? But I think also Roose admires that pure lust for power, that greed, that wanting to be the top dog, and probably sees a lot of himself in it. So yes, for Roose Bolton, Rose Prick. Next up is Yara, or Asha as she is in the books, and that is of course Theon's sister and kind of Queen of the Iron Islands, isn't it? And basically she's a very important person in the books. She helps Theon on his redemption curve. She sees through all that bullshit and keeps going back to rescue him, what? And look after him, and basically she's like the patriarchy of the Iron Islands, isn't she? And Pike, really the rightful king. And actually she is heir before they have the big sort of thing where Victorian from the books and all the other brothers come back to try and claim the throne, but rightfully it is hers. So what have I picked for her? Well, squid. And I think squid speaks for itself, doesn't it, really? It's not overly fishy, but it definitely has a kind of coastal, kind of sea air breeze about it. It's quite a grey scent as well, which I think represents Asha better, and also her kind of outlook on life. It's quite a strong fragrance. It's quite refreshing. It's quite lovely. But it definitely has that edge to it, doesn't it? It's how do you describe it? It both has this kind of sweet, kind of almost, I'd say, a little bit of a gourmand kind of warm feel that obviously she does, but is also like a very strong, powerful, in your face raw fragrance, and I think that kind of suits her the best. So for Asha or Yara, squid from Zoologist. Next up is Brienne of Tarth, who is like the great knight of the story, isn't she? She's the leader, the strong one. She's the one who protects. She keeps to her oath. She basically behaves in every way a knight should. And obviously she started off and she became a knight because of her love for Renly. And Renly was, he did make her a knight, but he kind of did dismiss her as a woman, but she was kind of used to that her whole life, wasn't she? But she still maintained that grace and that elegance. And she's the one who kind of helped again Jaime on his redemption by just being herself, really. And she didn't take all them insults. She had like a leather thick skin, didn't she? Not to take any grief. And what I've picked for Brienne is ombre leather. Now again, a very classy, elegant, but very leathery and dark fragrance, and with a little bit of a floral touch from the jasmine and that running through it. It's a very beautiful, thick scent, but it's in no way particularly traditionally feminine. So I think it suits Brienne absolutely perfectly. So for Brienne, we have ombre leather. And next up, we have Jorah, who very similarly to Brienne is very dedicated and very kind of loyal, isn't he, to Daenerys in his hand. But don't forget, he was sent there to spy on Daenerys and keep her under control. It was kind of his punishment of being banished for people smuggling. So he brought great shame to his family. And he was looking for a way to kind of redeem himself, and he found that through finding the next Queen Daenerys. And of course he did betray her. And like had happened previously, had to prove himself, didn't he? And he got grayscale. But what I've picked for Jorah is quite a weird one. And I've picked from collage again, actually, Oshun, which represents a goddess. The goddess of like this beautiful thing like water and such like. But it's a very beautiful floral, which I do actually think Jorah would have pretty much wore something soft and lovely, mainly to kind of get the attention of Daenerys, but also because it quite suits his personality, doesn't it? But as well as that, it's got quite a dirty underbelly, a bit of civet in it, a bit of castoreum, which again kind of represents that kind of sweaty side of Jorah, doesn't it, really? And yeah, filming is an absolute nightmare. These are students, these people jogging, can you believe it? Ridiculous. But yes, for Jorah I picked Oshun, and again I think it does represent the kind of the beauty of the man, the great loyalty and the great kind of deepness to him, and the fact obviously it would represent to him, it would represent Daenerys, his new goddess, his new kind of reason for living, etc, etc, isn't it? And a good reason to redeem himself. Okay. Now, next up is Tywin Lannister. Possibly one of the biggest characters in the books, and again one of the most important, with quite a big history and quite a big axe to grind. Now Tywin again comes across quite cold and quite calculating, which he is, but there is a reason for it again. Tywin again fought the war for Aegon, the previous king, and he got no reward for it really. Cersei was meant to be married off to Jon's father in the book, but she wasn't. But instead she ended up being married off to Robert after the war. And this obviously caused a bit of a stir really. So, but his daughter was still on the throne. But that wasn't really enough, was it? He wanted the whole throne for the Lannisters. And as soon as the War of the Kings kicked off, the Lannisters, being the richest, most powerful ones, wanted it all for themselves. And again, in fairness, Tywin had funded all of Robert's kind of wars and all of his luxuries and everything like that. So perhaps Tywin did deserve it. And his relationship with his children weren't great. He obviously wanted an heir, and to make sure that the Lannisters always held on to the rock and that, where, well, the gold mines were long empty, but he did want to make sure he held on to them. And Jaime was in the King's Guard, which he took as a personal smite because that meant he couldn't inherit. Obviously Cersei was a woman and married to the king, so she couldn't inherit. So it passed to Tyrion, who he had a deep hatred for as some sort of punishment and failure. So again, that made it kind of difficult for him. So no wonder Tywin was quite angry. But saying all that, what have I sent it in with? Grand Soir. Could you think of anything else better for Tywin? Such an elegant, sophisticated, almost warrior man. In his older years, a beautiful, warm, rich, luxurious amber. Just the perfect fragrance for him. So for Tywin Lannister, we have Grand Soir. Next up is Ygritte. Now Ygritte is a wildling, obviously, and the love of Jon's life, and she's the one who changes him and frees him from his shackles really, and makes him into a man. So Ygritte is a very important character, and also a very beautiful, interesting character in the books. Not only does she sort of help change Jon and make Jon see the kind of freedom that he needs to have and the freedom the wildlings have, but she also kind of leads the wildlings as such, doesn't she? She's a very strong, important character. What I've picked for Ygritte is of course Killian's Sweet Redemption. There's a particular reason for that fragrance. It's of course one of the red ones, and obviously Ygritte is kissed by fire with a beautiful red hair, but also it's a very sweet, thick, delicious fragrance, almost gourmand, but it's not quite as sweet as you think. It's got a little touch of incense and smoke in it, and it gets quite deep. It's got quite a bitter citrus, well, bitter feeling at the beginning from the orange blossom and that. It does become much deeper and more luxurious, but it's a very beautiful fragrance, and I think that matches Ygritte perfectly, in the sense that her heart's very much in the right place, but you don't mess with Ygritte, do you? She's very strong, she's very powerful, but she still maintains that femininity and that sweet side, and ultimately she's just looking out for the best. And as she might say, you know nothing, Jon Snow. So that's Ygritte and Killian's Sweet Redemption.